They thought no help was coming. Then a Terran warship tore a hole in the silence. The sky above Viridia was bleeding. For 7 days, it had wept a smoky, crimson sorrow, a permanent, unnatural twilight born from the Cthar Syndicate's plasma. Scourges boiling the upper atmosphere. Below, the crystalline capital of Elysia, a city that once sang with light, now lay silent and fractured. Its elegant spires were shattered teeth against the smoldering horizon, and a fine gray dust, the powdered remains of art and architecture, coated every surface like a funeral shroud. Administrator Alicia stood before the great, fractured window of the command spire, her slender ethel frame silhouetted against the ruin of her world. The shimmering, pearlescent quality of her skin had dulled to a weary matte gray. She hadn't slept. Sleep was a luxury Viridia could no longer afford. Administrator. The voice, rough with exhaustion, came from Commander Lorien. He stood at the entrance to the command chamber, his own formal military bearings slumped under the invisible weight of defeat. His uniform was torn, his face smudged with the same gray dust that covered their dying city. He held out a data slate, its flickering light a weak imitation of the life their world was losing. Alicia didn't need to take it. She could read the truth in his eyes. "How long?" she asked, her voice a soft, brittle thing. "The final shield generator at Mount Kalen is failing," Lorien stated, his voice devoid of emotion. It was the flat tone of a professional delivering a terminal diagnosis. "The energy fluctuations are critical. It will collapse within the hour. Once it does," he didn't need to finish. Once it fell, the Cthar harvester craft would descend. The final, brutal act of their compliance protocol. "And the shelters?" Alicia whispered, her gaze fixed on a plume of black smoke rising from what was once the Great Library. 3 standard hours of life support, perhaps less. The primary conduits were severed in the last bombardment. Lorien's gaze dropped to the floor. "I have failed you, Administrator. I have failed our people." "No, Lorien," Alicia said, turning to face him. She managed a faint, heartbreaking smile. "You held back an ocean with a teacup for 7 days. No one could have asked for more." She walked to the central command console, its crystalline surface cracked but still functional. With a deep breath, she activated the universal broadcast system, not with any hope of rescue. That hope had died on the 3rd day when the Galactic Compact's official reply had been a sterile message of non-intervention in unsanctioned territories. But for something more important, for memory, her fingers trembled slightly as she began the recording. "This is Administrator Alicia of the Ethel, recording the final testament of the Viridia colony." Her voice, though quiet, resonated with a strength that surprised even herself. "To whatever intelligence may find this record, know that we existed. We built a world of art and philosophy. We sought to understand the universe, not to conquer it." Her thoughts flashed back to the promise of this world, the shimmering spires, the songs of the crystal forests, the faces of the children. A profound, weary grief washed over her, the weight of being the last leader her species would ever have threatening to crush her. The Compact, with its laws and its promises of order, had watched them die from afar, unwilling to risk its pristine ships for a small colony in the unregulated zones. "We were met with unprovoked aggression by the Cthar Syndicate," she continued, her voice hardening. "We pleaded for aid. None came. Now, our end is upon us. But let the stars know we did not yield our spirit. We did not bow. We did not break. We are Ethel, and we will meet the end as we lived, with dignity." She ended the transmission, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. The final testament was sent, a whisper against the roaring silence of the galaxy. 3 hours. It was all they had left. Aboard the Cthar Syndicate flagship, the Ravager, the air was thick with the scent of ozone and the low hum of immense power. There were no view screens showing the burning world below, only stark, utilitarian data feeds projected onto walls of dark, chitinous plating. Harsh red light emanated from recessed strips along the floor, casting long, menacing shadows from the hulking forms of the bridge crew. This was not a command center for warriors. It was the nerve center of a slaughterhouse that War Master Cthar stood on the command dais, his massive, crab-like form perfectly still. His 4 primary limbs were folded across his broad carapace, a posture of absolute, unassailable authority. He watched the data streams with cold, dispassionate satisfaction as they confirmed the collapse of the final Ethel shield. The pacification was complete. Now, the harvest could begin. Report, he rasped, his voice a dry, guttural clicking. A junior officer scurried forward, its smaller frame bent in a gesture of rigid deference. War Master, the final planetary shield has failed. All orbital defenses are neutralized. The indigenous population is broadcasting a final testament on open channels. Kthar's mandibles twitched in amusement. A testament? How sentimental. Their philosophy has brought them nothing but extinction. He raised one of his heavy pincer limbs. Launch the harvester craft. I want the processing to begin within the hour. Standard protocols. Cull the weak, chain the strong. At once, War Master, the officer chittered, turning to relay the command. Just as the officer turned, another station chirped for attention. Sir, the sensor technician reported, a faint energy signature has been detected at the system's edge. FTL slipstream residue. Unidentified. Kthar did not even turn his immense head. Stray radiation from a dying star. A commercial. Freighter fleeing our glorious work. It is irrelevant. His focus was solely on the data feed that tracked the atmospheric descent of the first wave of harvester ships. To him, this was not war. War implied a contest, a struggle between equals. This was merely resource acquisition on an industrial scale. The Ethel were not a people. They were a crop ready to be reaped, their world a field to be stripped bare. The faint energy signature at the edge of his perception was a gnat in the face of his magnificent, world-devouring machine. It was less than nothing. Proceed with the harvest, Kthar commanded, his voice rumbling with the finality of a closing tomb. 3 light-years away, in the cold, silent void between star systems. Reality tore open without a sound. The Terran Coalition ship Vigilance materialized from the FTL slipstream, its sleek, angular hull of dark gray alloy absorbing the faint starlight. It was not a vessel of elegance or ostentation. It was a weapon, a shield, and a promise, built for the singular purpose of patrolling the lawless dark. Inside, the Combat Information Center was a cathedral of quiet competence. There was no grand viewport, only a central hollow tank that projected a three-dimensional rendering of the surrounding space in cool blues and whites. The crew moved with an economy of motion, their voices low and professional as data streamed across their consoles. This was the heart of a Pathfinder-class vessel, an environment engineered for maximum information density and tactical efficiency. Captain Elias Thorne stood before the hollow tank, his hands clasped behind his back. His face was weathered, etched with the lines of a man who had spent more time staring into the void than at his own homeworld sky. Report, he said, his voice calm and steady. Exited slipstream on schedule, Captain, the helm officer replied. All systems nominal. Performing standard deep space sensor sweep. Communications, Thorne prompted. A young officer, her brow furrowed in concentration, adjusted her headset. Standard background radiation, sir. No active transmissions, wait. She paused, her fingers flying across her console. Sir, I'm picking up a signal fragment. Very faint, heavily degraded. It appears to be a repeater broadcast. Thorne exchanged a look with Strategic Commander Isla Rostova, who stood at the edge of the hollow tank, her sharp eyes already analyzing the incoming data. Months ago, the Vigilance had seeded this entire unregulated sector with thousands of microscopic repeater probes, silent sentinels designed to listen for whispers in the dark. Isolate the source signal, Lieutenant, Rostova ordered, her voice crisp and analytical. Filter the degradation. Working, Commander. The lieutenant's fingers danced. It's a distress call, ma'am. Pre-spaceflight species, designation Ethel. Colony world Viridia, Kepler, 442 system. They're under attack. The holotank flickered, zooming in on a distant star system. Red icons bloomed across the display like a virulent rash. Tactical, what am I looking at? Thorne's voice had lost its casual edge, replaced by a cold, hard focus. Rostova's analysis was immediate and ruthless. Hostile fleet confirmed. Kthar. Syndicate. 1 Ravager-class flagship, for heavy cruisers, 15 escorts. They're executing a Class 7 subjugation protocol. Captain, planetary bombardment phase is complete. Sensors indicate multiple Harvester-class landing craft are deploying. She didn't need to elaborate. They had studied Kthar tactics. They knew what harvesting meant, that a heavy silence settled over the CIC. This was it. The reason they were out here, so far from the light of the Galactic Compact and its hollow laws. Life signs on the planet? Thorn asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Faint, sir, the communications officer whispered. Concentrated in what appear to be subterranean shelters. Life support is critical and failing. She played the core of the Ethel broadcast, the audio cleaned and translated by the ship's AI. The voice was weary, filled with sorrow, but unbroken. Know that we did not yield our spirit. We did not bow. Thorn closed his eyes for a single, sharp moment. He felt a familiar, cold anger settle in his gut. An anger at the Kthar, but also a deeper, more profound anger at the galactic order that allowed this to happen. The Compact, with all its power, drew lines on a map and declared anything outside those lines to be unregulated, effectively condemning entire species to be prey for the wolves of the galaxy. Humanity had decided it would no longer abide by those lines. This is a Shepherd Directive, Priority 1, Thorn announced, his voice ringing with absolute command. The Compact will not act, so we will. They are preying on the weak beyond the reach of law. We are the wall. We are the shepherds. He turned to Rostova, whose eyes already gleamed with tactical calculations. Isla, give me options. The Kthar fleet is overconfident, she stated without hesitation. Their shield modulation is predictable. Their formation is optimized for planetary assault, not fleet engagement. They do not expect a peer-level threat. We have the element of complete surprise. Make it count, Thorn said. Helm, plot a course for the Kepler system. Maximum sublight velocity. Communications, open a narrow beam channel to the Ethel leadership. Tell them help is on the way. The crew of the Vigilance moved as one, their quiet professionalism now honed to a razor's edge. This was the moment they had trained for. They were pathfinders, and a lost flock needed saving. For Alicia and Lorien, the world dissolved into a cacophony of light and a sensation of being turned inside out. One moment, they were in the ruin of their command spire. The next, they materialized in a Spartan, gray room, the air crisp and cool. The transition was so instantaneous, so utterly alien, that their minds struggled to comprehend it. Alicia stumbled, her weakened legs giving way, but a strong hand caught her arm, steadying her. She looked up into the face of a human, the one called Colonel Cole. His skin was a dark brown, a stark contrast to her own pale pearlescence, and his eyes, though watchful, held a surprising gentleness. Easy there, Administrator, he said, his voice a low rumble. The teleportation can be disorienting the first time. Lorien, ever the soldier, had managed to stay on his feet, but his hand rested on the hilt of a ceremonial blade that was useless against armor and starships. He stared around the room, taking in the three humans who stood before them. They were solid, grounded beings, radiating a calm, focused energy that felt utterly alien to the Ethel's weary despair. The briefing room was as functional as the humans themselves. A large, circular hollow table in the center was the only prominent feature, its surface dark and dormant. Welcome aboard the TCS Vigilance, Captain Thorn said, stepping forward. He motioned for them to join him at the table. Please, there isn't much time. As they took their seats, Alicia felt the profound chasm between their species. The humans were clad in simple, practical uniforms of dark blue and gray. She and Lorien were still covered in the fine dust of their shattered city, their formal attire torn and stained. They were refugees. These humans were professionals. I am Administrator Alicia, she began, finding her voice. This is Commander Lorien. We don't understand. Who are you? We are the Terran Coalition, Thorn explained, his gaze direct and unwavering. And we operate under a mandate we call the Shepherd Directive. The Galactic Compact refuses to police the unregulated zones, so we have taken it upon ourselves to protect those who cannot protect themselves from predators like the Kthar. Lorien straightened. You would oppose the Syndicate for a species you have never met. We oppose bullies wherever we find them. Commander, Strategic Commander Rostova interjected, her tone all business. She brought the holotable to life with a gesture. A detailed tactical display of the system appeared. Your world is a new variable, but the Kthar are not. We have studied them. Their tactics are brutal but unimaginative. They rely on overwhelming force. Now, I need your intelligence. Shield frequencies of your defunct generators, Kthar ground troop dispositions, weapon energy yields, anything you have. The request was so sudden, so pragmatic, that Lorien was taken aback. He had expected philosophical discussions, diplomatic overtures. These humans were already planning a battle. Alicia, thinking of her people in the ruins below, voiced her greatest fear. Your ground soldiers, the fighting in the cities, our civilians. Colonel Cole answered before Thorn could. Administrator, my Marines are governed by strict rules of engagement. Our primary mission in any ground action is civilian extraction and protection. We use non-lethal force whenever possible. We are not the Kthar. We do not make war on families. The conviction in his voice was absolute, and for the first time, a fragile tendril of genuine hope began to unfurl in Alicia's chest. Before she could respond, an alert chimed softly through the room. Captain, the communications officer's voice came through the overhead speaker. The Kthar flagship is hailing us. Thorn's expression hardened. On screen, the holotable shifted, displaying the massive, snarling face of Warmaster Kthar. His reptilian eyes widened in momentary surprise at the sight of Ethel leaders on a foreign warship, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. Human, Kthar hissed, the translator turning the sound into a venomous rasp. You have interfered where you do not belong. This world is claimed by the Syndicate. You have 1 standard hour to leave this system, or we will add your insignificant vessel to the pyre. The screen went black. The ultimatum hung in the silent room, a ticking clock counting down to annihilation or salvation. Captain Thorn turned to Alicia and Lorien, his face set like granite. It appears our time for discussion is over. Now we act. The hour expired. As if moved by a single, malevolent thought, the Kthar Armada began its advance. 24 warships, led by the monstrous Ravager, pushed forward, their prows glowing with weapon charge. Their intent was obvious and absolute: to erase the single, defiant human vessel from existence before resuming the methodical extermination of the Ethel. Aboard the Vigilance, the CIC was a portrait of calm readiness. No alarms blared. No one shouted. Kthar fleet is on an attack vector, Commander Rostova reported, her voice as level as a frozen lake. They are broadcasting their intent on all channels. A classic intimidation tactic. Let them posture, Captain Thorn replied, his eyes on the hollow tank. Launch the swarm. The Vigilance did not answer with a barrage of missiles or a volley of plasma. Instead, its hull seemed to shimmer as dozens of launch ports slid open. From them poured a cloud of small, black objects, each no larger than a human fist. They ignited their micro-thrusters and accelerated, not toward the enemy, but around them, fanning out in a complex, three-dimensional lattice. These were the Wasps. Hyper-agile, sensor-rich drones that moved with the twitchy, unpredictable speed of their namesakes. That on the bridge of the Ravager, Warmaster Kthar watched the deployment with utter contempt. Insects, he rasped. They respond to the might of an imperial fleet with a cloud of gnats. What foolishness is this? The Wasps began their dance. They dove toward the Kthar ships, veering away at the last possible second. They flew in intricate, corkscrewing patterns, skimming the energy shields of the alien vessels. They did not fire a single shot. Are they attempting to communicate? A Kthar officer asked, confused. They are attempting to mock us. Kthar roared. Swat them from the sky? All-point defense arrays, fire at will. The Kthar ships bristled with weapon fire. Turrets swiveled, tracking the tiny drones, unleashing beams of energy into the void. But hitting a wasp was like trying to shoot a bolt of lightning with a thrown rock. For every drone that was vaporized, 100 more continued their maddening, impossible dance. Aboard the Vigilance, data flooded Rostova's console. The Wasps were not attacking, they were learning. Every evasive maneuver, every near miss, every energy beam they analyzed fed a torrent of information back to the ship's combat AI, confirming. Kthar shield frequency, Rostova announced, her fingers a blur across her console, modulating on a predictable 1.7-second cycle. It's a standard harmonic wave pattern. Arrogant. Point defense targeting solution is sluggish, a tactical officer added. They show a 2.2-degree tracking lag against targets under 5 meters. Their systems are calibrated for capital ships, not for precision. Their energy dispersal is inefficient, Rostova continued, a hint of predatory satisfaction in her voice. Every shot they waste on a wasp is a measurable drain on their weapon capacitors. They're bleeding power, and they don't even realize it. Thorn watched the hollow tank as the Cthar fleet's disciplined formation began to subtly fray, their ships breaking rank to get better firing angles on the elusive drones. The dance of the wasps wasn't just gathering intelligence, it was sowing chaos. On the Ravager, Cthar's fury grew with every missed shot. More power to the arrays, he bellowed. I want every one of those pests vaporized. He was so focused on the perceived insult of the tiny drones, so blinded by his own rigid doctrine of overwhelming firepower, that he failed to notice the true threat. He failed to see that the dance was a prelude. He failed to understand that. The humans were not testing his patience. They were dissecting his strength, cataloging his weaknesses, and preparing to deliver a single, surgically precise, and utterly devastating killing blow. The dance ended. The last of the wasps, their data streams uploaded, either returned to the Vigilance or allowed themselves to be vaporized by the flailing Cthar point defense. A momentary quiet fell over the battlefield. On the bridge of the Ravager, Warmaster, Cthar let out a triumphant chitter. The insects are dead, he rasped. A foolish distraction. All ships, reform battle lines. Prepare to annihilate that pathetic human vessel. But the humans were not preparing to be annihilated. They were preparing to attack. In the Vigilance CIC, Commander Rostova made a final adjustment to her targeting solutions. Captain, the Cthar fleet is exposed. Their shield cycles are logged. Their weapon capacitors are depleted by an average of 12%, and their formation is in disarray. We have optimal firing solutions on 17 high-value targets. Make it so, Commander, Thorn said, his voice as cold and hard as the void. Execute Phase 2. From the observation deck, Alicia and Lorien watched the hollow tank, their hearts pounding. They had expected a battle of energy beams, a light show of unimaginable power. What they saw was something else entirely. The Vigilance didn't fire. Along its dorsal spine, a section of the hull peeled back to reveal a deep channel. A ripple of pure force, visible only as a brief distortion in space, pulsed along the channel. And then, a tiny, dark speck was hurled into the void at an impossible speed. There was no sound, no flash of light. Just a silent, deadly projectile. A tungsten slug encased in a magnetic field, accelerated to a significant fraction of the speed of light that on the Ravager's bridge, a klaxon shrieked. Impact warning, a technician screamed. Impossible. Shields are at full power. The slug from the Vigilance's magnetic accelerator cannon didn't care about energy shields. It was a physical object, a ghost that passed through the shimmering energy barrier as if it weren't there. It struck a Cthar cruiser just aft of its command section. The kinetic energy transfer was catastrophic. The alien ship didn't explode. In a blaze of glory, it simply came apart, its hull buckling and shattering as a silent shockwave of pure force tore through its internal structure. Before the Cthar could process what had happened, the Vigilance vanished. One moment it was there, the next, it was gone, leaving only empty space. Where did it go? Cthar bellowed, his compound eyes swiveling madly. Find it. The Vigilance reappeared 20,000 kilometers away, on the Cthar fleet's opposite flank, a precise microjump that its combat AI had calculated in microseconds. Another magnetic ripple, another silent slug. A second Cthar ship was gutted, its engines erupting in a soundless, brilliant flash. This is impossible. Lorien breathed, his hands pressed against the transparent wall of the observation deck. They move without moving. Their weapons, they ignore shields. Alicia was speechless. She was watching a force of nature her people considered gods being dismantled with the cold, brutal efficiency of a master artisan. The battle became a horrifyingly one-sided spectacle. The Vigilance was a phantom, a ghost in the machine of the Cthar fleet. It would appear, launch a devastating kinetic strike against a vital system, an engine block, a command bridge, a weapons capacitor, and then vanish before the enemy could retaliate. Rostova's targeting solutions, informed by the Wasp swarm, were perfect. Each shot was a killing blow to a ship, if not its crew. Chaos erupted on the Ravager's bridge. Reports flooded in from crippled vessels. Kthar's confident fury dissolved into disbelief, then into a sputtering, impotent rage. "Fire everywhere," he shrieked, a command that betrayed his complete loss of control. "It is only one ship. How can it be doing this?" His gunners obeyed, lashing out blindly, filling the space with useless beams of energy that struck nothing but their own disabled ships. They were fighting a ghost, a specter of warfare that operated on principles their rigid doctrine could not comprehend. Targeting solution locked on the Ravager's primary reactor housing. Rostova announced calmly in the serene CIC of the Vigilance. "A disabling shot, Captain. Not a kill." "Fire," Thorn ordered. The final slug screamed across the void. It struck the War Master's flagship at its heart. The monstrous vessel shuddered violently, its lights flickering and dying. Its engines sputtered into silence. The battle was over. In less than 10 minutes, a fleet of 24 Terran warships had been systematically neutralized by a single Terran vessel. 17 ships were disabled, drifting hulks. The rest were in disorganized retreat. That War Master Kthar slumped in his command throne, staring at the dead consoles and the image of the small, defiant human ship holding its position in the center of his ruined fleet. His arrogance was gone, his fury spent. All that remained was a vast, cold, and utterly terrifying understanding. He had not encountered primitives. He had encountered gods of war. As the last echoes of the space battle faded, a new assault began. High above Viridia, the underside of the TCS Vigilance opened, not with missile tubes, but with launch cradles. In them sat 12 sleek, coffin-shaped pods of matte black alloy. All marine elements. "This is Colonel Cole." His voice crackled across a secure channel, calm and authoritative. "The Kthar fleet is neutralized. Their ground command is deaf, dumb, and blind. We will not allow them time to recover. You have your targets. Mission is a go. Launch the nails." Onboard Pod 7, Sergeant Eva Rostova, Isla's younger sister, braced for release. Her HUD flickered to life inside her helmet, overlaying the cramped interior of the pod with targeting data and the vital signs of her 3-person fire team. Through the comms, she could hear the steady breathing of her comrades, a familiar rhythm of calm before the storm. "Nails away," the launch officer announced. The world became a symphony of controlled violence. Magnetic clamps released, and Eva's pod shot away from the Vigilance, accelerating with bone-crushing force. Through her tiny viewport, Viridia swelled from a marbled sphere to a vast, burning landscape. Atmospheric entry in 3, 2, 1. The pod shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere, the exterior glowing cherry red. It wasn't a descent, it was a guided impact. They were a bullet fired from orbit. Targeting solution locked on Bunker Alpha, the pod's AI stated calmly. Final trajectory adjustment. Eva's HUD highlighted their destination, a low, squat, heavily fortified structure in the heart of the ruined capital city, a Kthar command bunker. They weren't landing near it. They were landing on it. "Prepare for impact," Eva subvocalized. To her team, the impact was less a crash and more a surgical demolition. The pod's hardened penetrator tip struck the bunker's roof, explosive bolts firing a microsecond before contact to shatter the alien concrete. The nail punched through 2 reinforced layers before coming to a screeching halt in what looked like a primary command hub. The forward hatch blew open. "Go, go, go!" Eva screamed, leaping out into a scene of chaos. The Kthar officers inside, who had been trying to make sense of their fleet's sudden demise, now stared in disbelief as 4 armored human figures emerged from the smoking pod that had just destroyed their ceiling. "Alpha team is in," Cole's voice said in her ear. "Phase 1, deploy crowd control." Eva's team didn't fire their rifles. Instead, they tossed canisters that erupted in clouds of thick, shimmering gas. It was a specialized neurostun agent, harmless to ethyl physiology but devastating to the Kthar's insectoid nervous system. Other Marines, landing simultaneously at the other 2 bunkers, deployed sonic grenades that emitted a high-frequency pulse, incapacitating the Syndicate soldiers without leveling the surrounding. Ruins. Kthar warriors, bred for brutal frontal assaults, collapsed to the floor, their limbs twitching uncontrollably. They were overwhelmed not by superior firepower, but by a form of warfare they couldn't comprehend. The humans weren't trying to kill them all, they were simply turning them off. With the main garrison neutralized, the Marines advanced on the inner command sanctums. Here, they switched to lethal force. Kthar elite guards, protected within the shielded chambers, met them with plasma fire. The Marines returned fire with their standard-issue pulse rifles, each shot a precise, controlled burst. Their movements were a fluid dance of violence. They used cover, provided suppressing fire, and flanked their enemies with a level of tactical coordination the Kthar's rigid, top-down command structure couldn't match. Eva rounded a corner and came face-to-face with a massive Kthar Praetorian, its carapace thicker, its weapon larger. The alien snarled and raised its rifle, but Eva was faster. She dropped to one knee, sliding under the blast of plasma while firing upward. Her round struck the unarmored joints of the Praetorian's neck. The giant fell with a sickening crunch. Tango down, she reported calmly, already moving toward the next objective. Throughout the three bunkers, the story was the same. The human Marines, outnumbered but not outfought, systematically dismantled the Kthar ground command. They were a force unlike any the Syndicate had ever faced. They fought with the ferocity of predators, but with the precision of surgeons, and, most disturbingly to their enemies, with a clear and unwavering focus on protecting the planet's civilian population. They actively avoided engagements near known shelters and prioritized neutralizing threats over racking up a body count. Bunker Alpha secure, Eva reported, standing over the defeated Kthar commander. Enemy command structure is decapitated. We have their data core. Copy that, Sergeant, Colonel Cole replied. His voice held a grim satisfaction. All bunkers report mission complete. Total time from orbital insertion, 7 minutes. Eva looked around the captured command hub. The Kthar had believed themselves to be the ultimate predators of the galaxy. But in 7 minutes, they had learned a vital lesson. There was always a bigger monster. And this one fought not just with claws and fury, but with a plan. The war for Viridia had turned. The Kthar's brutal, monolithic power, once an unstoppable hammer, had been shattered. Now leaderless and confused, their ground forces were scattered pockets of resistance against a rising tide of hope. Deep beneath the surface, in the vast, echoing chambers of the crystal mines, that hope arrived in the form of Sergeant Rostovis. Fireteam. Eva and her Marines moved into the cavern not with guns blazing, but with medkits open and their helmets retracted to show the Ethel their human faces. The cavern was a sea of terrified, huddled forms. Thousands of Ethel who had prepared for death, only to be met by these strange, armored saviors. Eva knelt beside a small Ethel child who was crying silently, her pearlescent skin smudged with dirt and tears. The child flinched as the huge, armored human approached. "Hey there," Eva said softly, her voice amplified just enough by her suit's external speaker to be heard over the hum of the emergency lights. She offered the child a nutrient paste. "Pack it from her own rations. It's okay. The monsters are gone now. We're here." The child stared at her for a long moment, then hesitantly took the packet. All around them, other Marines were doing the same, distributing water, treating the injured, and speaking in calm, reassuring tones. They were not conquerors, they were guardians. Their presence was a shield, and under its protection, the spirit of the Ethel people began to rekindle. Simultaneously, aboard the Vigilance, another form of synergy was taking place. The ship's main engineering lab, a space of sterile gray alloys and humming conduits, was now home to an array of luminous, multifaceted Ethel crystals salvaged from the planet's ruined defense network. Commander Lorien, his uniform now clean, worked alongside human technicians, his initial shock replaced by a fire of intellectual curiosity. "Your fusion reactors are magnificent," Lorien said, watching a human engineer interface a power conduit with one of the larger crystals. "The power output is staggering, but your energy dispersal is crude." The human engineer, a woman with oil-stained hands and a wry smile, just laughed. "We're pragmatic, Commander. We build what's durable." You Ethel build what's beautiful. Perhaps, Lorien mused, a spark of inspiration in his eyes. We can build something that is both. He directed the engineer to a smaller, intricately faceted crystal. This one doesn't just conduct energy, it harmonizes it, focuses it through quantum resonance. If you can provide the raw power from your reactor, our crystals can shape it into a planetary shield far more efficient than anything either of our species could build alone. The engineer's eyes lit up. A hybrid system. I like it. Let's get to work. For Lorien, this was a new kind of battle, one fought with schematics and energy fields instead of weapons. He felt a sense of purpose he thought he had lost. Forever, the pride of a protector finding a new way to defend his home. And on the surface, that home was being reclaimed. The Cthar ground troops, deprived of their hive mind command, were in complete disarray. They fought sporadically, without coordination, their brutal strength no match for organized tactics. Human marine squads moved through the crystalline ruins, systematically capturing the leaderless soldiers, but they were no longer fighting alone. Ethel volunteers, armed with captured Cthar weapons and newly arrived Terran pulse rifles, fought alongside them. They were not natural warriors, their movements lacking the practiced economy of the humans, but they fought with the ferocity of a people taking back their world. They had been victims, then survivors, and now they were becoming fighters. The turning of the tide was absolute. It was in the grateful eyes of the rescued children in the mines. It was in the hum of creation in the Vigilance's engineering bay. And it was in the defiant war cries of Ethel militia fighting for every shattered street of their capital. The human intervention had not just saved Viridia, it had reawakened it. The bridge of the Ravager was a portrait of failure. Consoles sparked and spat, showering the chitinous deck plates with embers. Wounded Cthar crew members groaned, attended to by their comrades in a state of disorganized shock. The harsh red emergency lighting pulsed like a dying heart. In the center of it all, War Master Cthar stood amidst the wreckage of his command dais, his massive frame radiating a palpable aura of disbelief and impotent fury. Into this tableau of defeat, three figures materialized from shimmering columns of blue-white light. Captain Elias Thorne, Colonel Marcus Cole, and Administrator Alicia appeared as if stepping from another dimension. Cole and his Marines, who had boarded and secured the bridge moments before, formed a silent, disciplined perimeter. Cthar's mandibles clicked, a reflexive threat display that now seemed utterly pathetic. He stared at the human captain. Then his gaze shifted to the Ethel administrator. The sight of this primitive, this prey, standing on the bridge of his flagship as a conqueror was a deeper wound than any his ship had suffered. Your fleet is disabled, Captain Thorne stated, his voice cutting through the low hum of failing systems. It was not a boast or a threat, but a simple statement of fact. Your ground command structure has been decapitated. Your forces are in retreat or surrendering. This war is over. Cthar wanted to snarl, to fight, to tear them apart with his own pincers. But he looked at the cold professionalism in the human's eyes and the unyielding strength in the Ethel's posture, and he knew it was true. His campaign, his glorious harvest, had been undone in a matter of hours by a species he had dismissed as irrelevant. That it was Alicia who stepped forward, her slender form no longer appearing fragile, but instead radiating an ancestral strength. She had borne the weight of her people's potential extinction, and now she would be the architect of their rebirth. Her voice, once soft and weary, was now as clear and sharp as the finest Viridian crystal. On behalf of the sovereign people of Viridia and our allies in the Terran coalition, I present you with the terms of your unconditional surrender. Cthar's entire body tensed. To be dictated to by this quarry. First, Alicia declared, her eyes locked on his. You will immediately order all remaining Cthar Syndicate forces to withdraw from the Kepler system. Any vessel that fails to comply will be destroyed. Second, she continued, her voice gaining strength. You will release all Ethel prisoners and return all plundered resources. The Syndicate will pay reparations for the lives, property, and cultural artifacts destroyed during your illegal and barbaric assault. Third, and finally, she said, her voice ringing with the authority of a queen. The Cthar Syndicate will formally recognize the sovereignty of the Ethel of Viridia and our binding defensive pact with the Terran Coalition. You will never again enter this system without our express permission. These terms are not negotiable. The War Master's mind was a storm. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to die rather than accept this humiliation. But as he looked past the leaders to the human Marines standing in perfect, silent formation, he saw something his species had never truly understood. He saw a power that was not just based on strength, but on principle. A power that was controlled, focused, and utterly absolute when provoked. They had not just defeated him, they had dissected his power, analyzed it, and rendered it obsolete. His rage was a fire doused by the cold, deep ocean of their competence. With a grating sound that was the Cthar equivalent of a soul-crushing sigh, Cthar lowered his head in a gesture of submission. The Syndicate accepts these terms. Alicia did not smile. She simply nodded, a gesture of profound, solemn victory. She had faced the monster that came to devour her world and had dictated the terms of its departure. In that moment, she was not just an administrator. She was the living spirit of her people, unbowed and unbroken. The withdrawal of the Cthar Syndicate was a funereal procession. Battered cruisers, their hulls scarred and breached, limped into formation behind the crippled Ravager. Engines that had screamed with power now sputtered with weak, intermittent thrust. It was the slow, ignominious retreat of an empire that had just been taught a lesson in humility. The Vigilance held its position, a silent, solitary guardian watching the monsters depart. Just as the last Cthar vessel prepared to tear a hole in space and flee into the slipstream, reality fractured again. 3 new fleets dropped into existence, their arrival clean and precise. They were not Cthar. One fleet consisted of sleek, obsidian ships that seemed to drink the light, their forms angular and predatory. Another was a collection of bulky, asymmetrical vessels that bristled with what looked like organic, crystalline weaponry. The third was comprised of smaller, spherical ships that moved in perfect, swarming unison, like a school of metallic fish. Aboard the Vigilance, the CIC was instantly on alert. Unidentified contacts, a tactical officer called out. Signatures: Match Fury stealth frigates, Arn collective hive ships, and Shangshur Federation cruisers. Thorn's eyes narrowed. These were all species from the unregulated zones, all known to have suffered from Cthar predation in the past. Friend or foe, a single Fury ship, a blade of polished black metal, broke from its fleet and approached. A transmission request followed. On screen, Thorn ordered. The face that appeared was that of a tall, gaunt being with skin the color of ash. A complex rebreather apparatus covered the lower half of its face, hissing softly. Its eyes, ancient and weary, were wide with a combination of awe and disbelief. Terran vessel, the Fury Admiral began, his voice a synthesized baritone. I am Admiral Zalen of the Fury Protectorate. We tracked the energy signatures of your battle. We saw the Cthar fleet break. We did not believe the reports until we witnessed their retreat with our own sensors. The Arn collective representative, a shimmering insectoid creature, appeared on another screen. The Syndicate has preyed upon our hives for generations. You have done what our combined strength could not. You have made them bleed. Finally, a Shangshur diplomat, a being of pure, glowing light held within a crystalline shell, spoke, its voice a melodic chime. We have long watched the Cthar's tyranny from the shadows, too fearful to act. You have shown us that fear is no longer our only option. We have come to offer our ships, our knowledge, our strength. We ask to stand with you. Thorn looked from one alien face to another. He saw the same emotions in each: desperation, astonishment, and a new, flickering flame of hope. They had come not to challenge the victor, but to join them. This was the moment. The turning point not just for Viridia, but for this entire forgotten quadrant of the galaxy. Humanity could become the new dominant power, replacing the Cthar's tyranny with their own. The temptation was there, a whisper of empire. Thorn silenced it without a second thought. We welcome your friendship, he said, his voice carrying across the channels to all 3 fleets. The Terran Coalition is honored to stand with the Fury, the Arn, and the Shangshur. But you must understand our terms. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. This is an alliance of equals. We do not seek subjects or vassals. We will share knowledge. We will share in our mutual defense. We will build a future where no species has to live in fear of being harvested. We do not conquer. The Vuri admiral's rebreather hissed for a long moment. The Yarn representative's multifaceted eyes blinked rapidly. The Shangshir's light pulsed with a warm, golden hue. They had expected a new master, a new warlord to whom they would have to pledge fealty. They were being offered a partnership, an alliance of equals, Admiral Zalen repeated, the words sounding foreign but full of promise. The Vuri accept these terms. It is a new day. The Yarn Collective will stand with the builders, the insectoid declared. The Shangshir Federation pledges its light to this new dawn. The diplomat chimed. Thorn gave a single, sharp nod of acknowledgement. A new power block had just been born in the void, founded not on ancient dominance or brutal conquest, but on a simple, revolutionary idea brought by a species the galaxy had never known. The idea of a helping hand. 1 year later, the capital of Viridia was reborn. Where shattered crystal had once littered the ground, new spires rose, their facets catching the light of their sun in a brilliant, joyful song. In the heart of the city, in a space now known as Vigilance Plaza, a new memorial stood. It was a simple, elegant structure of dark Terran alloy intertwined with luminous Viridian crystal, symbolizing the two cultures that had bled together to save this world that a crowd of thousands had gathered. Ethel stood shoulder to shoulder with the tall, ash-skinned Vuri, the multi-limbed Arn, and the glowing Shangshir. They were here to dedicate the memorial and to witness the formal ratification of the new galactic cooperative. Administrator Alicia, her skin once again shimmering with health and confidence, stood at the podium. She looked out at the faces of her people, their expressions no longer etched with fear, but with a quiet, resilient hope. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying across the plaza. We stood on the precipice of annihilation. We sent our final words into a silent galaxy, believing all hope was lost. But the galaxy was not silent. A call was answered. She turned her gaze to Captain Thorn and the senior crew of the Vigilance, who stood as honored guests. The Terrans came. They did not come for tribute or territory. They came because they heard a plea for help. They fought for us with a skill and ferocity that shattered an empire. But they gave us something more valuable than victory. Her voice swelled with emotion. They taught us not only how to fight, but how to hope again. They showed us that strength is not found in dominance, but in unity, and that the greatest power in the universe is the courage to stand for those who have fallen. A respectful silence fell over the crowd as she finished. Then, Captain Thorn stepped to the podium. His face was, as always, serious and composed, but his eyes held a warmth that the Ethel had come to recognize and trust. He looked not at the dignitaries, but at the ordinary people in the crowd, the families, the children. We are honored by your words, Administrator, he said simply. But the courage was always yours. We only provided the tools. The Terran Coalition asks for no payment for what we have done. We seek no reward. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the diverse assembly of species. We ask for only one thing in return. A promise. He let the word hang in the air. Remember this day. Remember what it felt like to be alone and without hope. And if, in your future, you should ever hear a call for help echoing from the darkness, answer it. Do not consult treaties, do not calculate profits. See a neighbor in need, and answer the call. That is the Terran way. And now, it is the cooperative's way. He stepped back from the podium. There was no thunderous applause. Instead, a deep, resonant hum rose from the assembled crowd, a sound of profound, shared understanding that transcended species. Later, as the TCS Vigilance prepared to depart, Thorn stood with Alicia on the spire's observation deck, watching. The new fleets of the cooperative patrol the system. You have given us our future, Elias, Alicia said quietly. You have given us a reason to believe the future is worth fighting for, he replied. The human ship, the vessel that had torn a hole in the silence, rose gracefully from the planet. It did not linger for ceremony. Its mission here was done. As it ascended into the clear blue sky of a world reborn, it was joined by its Vuri, Arn, and Shangshir allies. A new fleet, a new hope, turning toward the vast, dark expanse of the unregulated zones. They were shepherds, and there were other flocks to watch over.